power. You see, very few people who voted for them will say, well, you see, I was walking through the streets of Delhi and I thought, oh my God, we need development. And who can provide development? So Kejriwal isn't going to do it. Modi, yeah, he's the man. Yeah, I'm going to vote for him because I want development. Nobody did that. You see, and anyway, development is what everyone promises. You see, it's a very common thing. So, next. Development is, in fact, extremely common. You see, in the last phase of colonialism, you see, colonials felt obliged to justify themselves. In the beginning, not at all, but at the end, yes. Like Macaulay, for instance, the much maligned Thomas Babington Macaulay, very much emphasized that you see, we want to help India go forward. You see, and one of the elements in this is that we need a class of people speaking English to whom we can communicate all the innovations. And so, like Belgium, where I'm from, you see, they prided themselves on giving the Congo a railway system, just like the British did in India. So, development, it's a colonial slogan. Then when Nehru came to power, of course, in mindset, he was as colonial as anything. So he proposed to replace India's temples with what he called the new temples, which is like hydroelectric, modern works. And then what development really meant could be, filled in differently in a socialist Soviet sense, like under Indira, or in a free market sense from Narasimha Rao onwards. But at any rate, development. They all promised development. Then came Vajpayee. At that time, you see, India was at the peak of economic growth. He called it India Shining, Bharat Uday. And that was thanks to development. I remember, you see, shortly before the 2004 elections, you had all these posters about the great Indian quadrilateral. So that, you see, modern entrepreneurs would not have to spend time looking at these miserable slums or, next to the railway to Mumbai. No, usually they have big highways, you see, straight from Chennai to Mumbai. Yeah, well, okay. And very, very likely this whole class of rich entrepreneurs voted Modi. Yeah. But that's not what won him the election. Vajpayee, I mean. That's not what won him the election. On the contrary, he lost the election. At the time when India was at its peak economically, he lost the election. Well, so maybe that development argument is not all that strong. But at any rate, the development slogan is there. So if you don't know what to do, or if you have something to hide, you can always bask in the development mantra. Well, now defenders of this development thing, they always say, but it's the real issue. We have to go after the real issue. If you bring up cultural issues, but we need the real issue. Like, for instance, in 1965, when the constitutional promise of replacing English with Hindi was not kept through intervention from the Nehruvian elite, then that policy was defended by the famous cartoonist Lakshman, who had this drawing of a sinking ship where there were sharks around of unemployment and I don't know, all kinds of economic inflation and so on. Sharks around, so it was a really dangerous thing. And yet you see on the top deck, you see two sailors fighting each other. Hindi, English. That's always the first line of defense of people defending a status quo, is to say that, the issue you are raising is not a real issue. It's a fake issue. I'm concentrating on the real issues. And you want to waste our precious time with false issues. As usual. So anyway, you see, it's like development is the real issue. And if you don't like our language policy, well, that's a fake issue. Well, I disagree, but you see, apparently all the Modi bhakts think like that. Then you see when you say, but there's a cultural agenda, and I will go into what that is. But so there are other issues. Then nowadays the Modi bhakts will say, but people want development. All these Dalits, they want toilets built. Well, I'm not against development. I'm not against toilets being built. But I'm talking about there are also other issues. In fact, the official ideology of the BJP and of the RSS since a long time is integral humanism. Now, integral humanism is a name that already appeared in a French book, 1936, by Jacques Maritain, called Humanisme Intégral, integral humanism. He was a Catholic, and he was faced with the situation that communism was coming up, and even apart from communism, there were other anti-religious currents, and they called themselves humanists. And so his point was that a humanism that neglects or that denies the religious dimension of every human being is not a real humanism, is not an integral humanism. Now, you see, that's more or less the thinking of the John Sang in the 1960s when this term in India was coined. The situation was quite the same. Here in India, you also had the rise of communism, the rising threat of communism. Here also you had an increasing dominance of a secularist, anti-religious ideology. And so against that, you had integral humanism, which incidentally, I think is a modern, conceptually refined term that essentially captures the same meaning as dharma. So you see, I don't think very highly of the work of Deen Dayal Upadhyay, but that term was a term of genius. And it was very good of the RSS BJP to say, this is our ideology. And incidentally, and now I'm going a little bit off topic, but it's important nonetheless. In 99% of publications about the RSS or BJP, there is no mention of integral humanism. You see, you imagine books about the British Labour Party that don't mention socialism, or about the Chinese Communist Party that don't mention Marxism. This is unthinkable, inconceivable, and yet about Hindu nationalism, this is the reality. Why is that? Well, this is why the term is genius. It is because it captures very well what Hinduism is about, therefore also what Hindu politics in the service of Hinduism is about, and it sounds so innocuous, so normal. You see, when you want to depict Hindus as a bunch of fascists, if you want to spread hate against Hindus, and that is, of course, what most scholars about Hindutva do, then you do not have any interest in labeling them integral humanists. You see, then it is a term that you really should put under the carpet, that people don't see it, that they don't get the wrong idea that there is something human about Hinduism. No, it's ugly, vicious. So you see, that term was, in fact, very good. I think it was very correct. It was also strategically very good, though he didn't think of that, I suppose. But it's a very good term. Anyway, so now let's go back to the next one. The next one, yes. So you see, his position was also that, to use a Christian expression, man liveth not by bread alone. You see, if man liveth by bread alone, then you see Indira Gandhi's socialism was good enough. What do you need Hinduism for? You see, if you want to have anything to do with Hinduism or with any other religion, you are implying that man liveth not by bread alone. That development alone is not the answer. That is such a fundamental insight. I mean, why do I have to be saying all this? You see, the BJP has drifted off really very far from its roots that I even have to say this. This is so obvious. Okay, well, nevertheless, so the BJP, at least right now, has chosen to ignore all these issues and concentrate on development. Though I notice that when they bring in, that's another argument, yeah, but the Aam Aadmi, it is as if they are in the service of Kejriwal, the common man, he needs development. Well, I noticed that the common man in practice sets great store by other things than development. Like, for instance, I will quote the enemy. Some Christian missionary that I used to know when I was a student in Benares, he said, you see, we have this problem. We like to do social work among poor villagers, but what we notice, we try to make them responsible, that they don't feel that they are on a gravy train, that there is in America some money machine that now provides for them. No, you see, we want to make them responsible. So you see, we dig a well and we ask each of them to pay 1 rupee, even if there is 100,000 rupees coming from America, then still we want to make them feel that they have a stake in this. So we ask them each for 1 rupee. But this is difficult to get that 1 rupee. By contrast, if the son of some family has made it in Mumbai and he's coming back to the village and he's bringing the necessary machinery to show a movie, that was in those days when not everyone had television yet, or not every village had television yet. Then suddenly, you see, they can all cough up the money to make this possible. So you see, to titillate the mind, to have something to do, which is part of the function traditionally of temples, people, are willing to sacrifice a lot, and that's more important to them than development. I'm not saying development is not important. Nevertheless, if you want to use the common man as an argument, history tells a different story. Okay. So today, India is governed by the Hindu nationalists. This is already, in fact, something of a victory, something of progress, that now the international media are totally used to using the term Hindu nationalists. You see, even though I criticize nationalism, I think it's a misstatement of Hindu concerns, nevertheless, it's a bit better. In the time of the Ayodhya affair, it was always the Hindu fanatics, the Hindu fundamentalists, very often the Hindu fascists. And so Hindu nationalist is an acceptable term. Anyway, so they are in power. Yeah, they brought in the nationalist paradigm. I don't have to repeat that, what I explained earlier. So they brought in that paradigm and then they put it into practice. 1925 was the foundation of the RSS. And the RSS was in fact a fulfillment of a slogan launched by Swami Shraddhananda, Hindu Sangathan, Savior of the Dying Race. It was the title of a book of his about the same time as Savarkar's Hindutva. And so Hindu self-organization was important to him. Of course, the title does not mention the other thing that even in that book, but generally also in the practice of his own life, he thought equally important, namely Shuddhi, reconversion. We'll come to that. But so this Hindu Sangathan was put into practice by the RSS. And you see, in terms of self-organization, in a practical, in a down-to-earth sense, it is indeed impressive. And so this is what you see in when there is a disaster, a flood or an earthquake or so. You see, they provide the first relief. That is to say, you see, or maybe you haven't seen, because the media, of course, try to put the lid on this. Or, for instance, in the Western media, it's common that they show a tent or so of relief workers, which, with my limited knowledge of Hindi, I can recognize as, oh, this is an RSS thing. You see, but the Westerners don't read that. And so the caption simply says, that it's relief. And then the reader is left to assume that this is government relief or Christian relief. And so this aspect of RSS work is totally hidden. And also, you see, in articles in the Western press about the RSS, this is just not mentioned. Though, you see, it's only superficial, but it's a big, quantitatively speaking, it's important.
The social media is a good alternative to that. With the Kerala floods, for example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
RSS was quite, present. Yeah. The social media.
Yeah, but you see, when it comes to the RSS in Kerala, what very, very little is written about it in the specialized third world-oriented press in the West is that they murder these poor, hapless communists. Which they don't say, where they don't say that this is done in revenge for the murders of RSS people. So I mean, to really counter the propaganda through the media is an enormously big job.
Yes.
And again, even social media is it's not about free speech or anything, right? As we assume. That's why China has realized it. They cracked down on all the US-based social media, right? US social media not only channelizes information the way the Western governments want,
yes, I know.
But also are very ideologically slanted, right? So that's why I think reliance on social media.
There's a slight glimmer of,
I think it's a misleading glimmer because it's like jumping out of the fire pan into the fire. Okay, we really need to have an alternative. China
I got to know about it only through social media.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes, you see that problem. The privatization of censorship through the social media makes the problem of censorship even more intractable.
Right.
With states, you can at least demand, you are the state for everyone. You have to give everyone equal rights to free speech. With private companies, that's much harder. And I noticed when I was in Beijing, my own Gmail account, I couldn't access because Google is completely blocked. And, if I had noticed that a few years ago, I would have fired up and say, hey, this is anti-freedom and so on. I perfectly understand. You see, if they do censorship, it's not nice. But if they do it to censorship organizations like Facebook and so on, I won't shed a tear.
And not only that, I think it's more about real freedom and economic freedom because all the social media technology and everything you're using today, it's in the coming years, it's going to be driven by machine learning and deep learning algorithm, for which the key is underlying data. So why should China, with 1.6 billion population, offer it on a platter for free to American corporations, right? They should just create their alternative and ask American companies to go on that.
And there you have another Hindu mistake. You see, if you want to be a superpower, and I hear a prominent role in information technology, well, what's it? Because there in Beijing, I saw but this makes a really big difference. And so people who have their finger on the pulse of that sector certainly can tell you more about it. But I understand that China blocks these sites. Okay. So good self-organization. I've noticed that finally they had government power to nominate the right people. Because you see, when the communists, like when they were in power in 2004, 2009, together with Congress, they nominated lots of people in key posts where they would stay for the rest of their lives when the communists were long out of power. But you see, even a few people they had were spurned in favor of some RSS gerontocrat who needed to be rewarded for his lifelong service to the Sangh, and who was, in terms of policy making in the institutions, totally useless. First of all, by being incompetent, and secondly, by just not having the dynamic anymore because he's just too old. So they systematically miss their chance in that field. I've noticed in Indology lists that they go by the assumption that there is some powerful drive, in the Hindu movement, and that they use their power to Hinduize India and so on. Well, I can tell you from the front bench, this is not happening. To open the chair for Indian studies, they didn't dare to call it Hindu studies in Oxford. And immediately all the secularist press were shouting, saffronization. Now they nominated Sanjay Subramaniam, who is a declared enemy of Hindu. You see, they tried to curry favor with the secularists. They thought, let's prove that we're not Hindu. Well, you see, this is how Hindu they are. And of course, you see, their highest goal in life is that pat on the back from the secularists. Everything they do is geared towards that end, and they never get it. The secularists have never written, oh, you see, this is so nice. You see, how nice that you haven't brooked any Hindu subjects under Modi in power. You see, no, you see, this is totally eluding them, and yet they keep on trying for it. Who said it, Einstein or someone, that the definition of madness is, you see, going after the same goal, doing the same thing over and over again, and yet expecting a different outcome. Well, you see, go to the RSS and you have that.
And not only that, even on very simple things, where they could have done something and put the secularists, leftists, Christians and Muslims on the top, the Modi government. One example is Sanal Edamadu, right?
Who?
Sanal Edamadu, the Indian rationalist who exposed the Christian church, the Jesus tears controversy, and he had to flee the country because fearing arrest, he had to go and take refuge in Finland. Modi comes to power. The first thing to be done in a grandstanding is to say, come back, you will not be ever persecuted, and then immediately table a bill in the parliament saying that, such rationalists cannot be hunted down anymore, right? Now, that really put everybody in the dark, and he simply did not.
Yeah, exactly.
So another thing, right? I kind of totally agree with you. I was talking to Shri. So I asked her, when maybe people who are in the helm of RSS as an organization, to tell me something. Before the elections, the BJP said three things: Uniform Civil Code, Article 370, and the Ram Mandir, right? Now, out of the three, 4 years have passed. What has the government done? Not three, not two, one, not even that. Okay. If you ask them, they will say, "Oh, we don't have majority in Rajya Sabha. This is a fractious decision. This and that." Okay, all right, we forgive you. But then, have all the Kashmiri points been rehabilitated nicely? No. There are provisions in the constitution, which is why Lingayats today are saying that they are a different religion, right? Because they can go and manage their own institutions. Have you done something? This is not as fractious as Article 370 or Ram Mandir.
Actually, you should even be. Thing is, right?
Like nothing is happening.
No. The thing is, you can be as fractious or handle issues that are very fractious, but Modi has to learn a lesson from Jayalalitha. Now, for example, it's not just Ram Mandir, right? And
the Common Civil Code. You see, the Common Civil Code, of course, is a correct demand. I am only it being a secular demand, create public opinion and so on in such a way that the demand emanates from the secularists. Or, of course, you may also not do that, you can impose it. But what you get then is rioting from every single Muslim, because they don't want it. Now, personally, I don't think that should stop you, not indefinitely. But if, like the BJP, you are worried about your secular standing and you don't want those riots, maybe not because you care about all the human lives lost, but at any rate because you care about the fact that your reputation is tainted because everybody will blame the BJP. Okay. Now, you see, I'll take that into account. I accept the BJP reasoning, and there I would say, okay, on the Common Civil Code, that's for a next stage. We don't do that now. So on some issues, it's perfectly okay for the BJP to temporize and to lie low and not to do things. But then there are other things that are in fact more important than the Common Civil Code, because after all, the Common Civil Code is not really a Hindu thing. Throughout Hindu history, you've never had a Common Civil Code. I mean, every caste had its own mores and so on, and so therefore, you see, when the Muslims came with a different law system, the Sharia, it more or less could fit into whatever existed in India, because there effectively was coexistence of different law systems. So that's a demand of modernity, of secularism. But anyway, I think it's a correct demand. But as I said, there I could live with Sharia law for a little bit longer if certain other things are done before. And so you mentioned the eagerness of the Lingayats to be recognized as non-Hindu. Earlier groups have done the same thing before, the Jains. The Ramakrishna Mission has tried for it, they have not succeeded. The Arya Samaj in Punjab is also recognized as a minority. And so in Hinduism, there is this scramble for the exit. Everybody wants to get out. It's like a sinking ship, you see. You know what a rat looks like? Well, you have to go to a sinking ship and see who is leaving. So you see the rats, like the Khalistanis, for example, they are all saying, I'm Hindu, Hindu. And so you people are the last remains who stood proudly when everybody else was fleeing. Nevertheless, this is an absurd situation. And you see, if you are a pro-Hindu party, now that is like the first thing to take up, that there is simple equality. You know, no fundamentalism, no Hindu Rashtra, and so on, just simple, fundamental equality. Everybody the same before the law. Hindu schools, the same duties and the same rights as Muslim schools. That's so obvious, so normal. So you see, that is what you should take up. And you know, in this case, amending the constitution and making sure that Hindu schools have the same rights as minority schools doesn't hurt any minority. It doesn't take away any rights from the minorities. It effectively takes away some of their privileges, but we won't say that aloud. But it doesn't take any right away. And so it is a normal thing to do. And you don't even have to call yourself a Hindu party to take that up. It's just an issue of equality. Then don't call yourself Hindu Rashtra, or so. Call it egalitarianism. But at any rate, from that follows the amendment to the Constitution or reinterpretation of the Constitution to the effect that the majority automatically has all the same rights that the minorities have.
So then my question to you is, what do you think explains the conclusion of Mr. Narendra Modi and Mr. Amit Shah? They are supposed to be very savvy politicians, right? And now they are basically not caring about their core constituency. Maybe it ideologically the Hindu right, or even the economically the middle class constituency.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that being secular and development oriented or whatever will win an election. They're politicians after all. But they're supposed to be savvy politicians, right? One day, my sister wrote on Facebook that we are under attack from Christian missionaries, Islamists, communists, and some of us are thinking about the NOTA option, no alternative option. But I am asking her, if Narendra Modi and BJP is booted out in this particular election, is it the fault of only voters like us, or is it not their fault? I mean, they're supposed to be politically savvy.
Right. Okay. Okay, let's look at it briefly from a purely politician's viewpoint. If you want to win the elections, what do we do? Now, some people say, well, you see, development has won us the last elections, though it didn't win Vajpayee, the elections in 2004. Nevertheless, we can hypnotize ourselves to believe that in 2014 we have won the elections thanks to development. Well, I can't suppress the urge to comment on that first. You see, the Hindu voters at that time, they liked Modi. Not at all because of the, well, yeah, it played a role. You see, the fact that in Gujarat, he had, done well economically and infrastructure and so on. That certainly was part of his aura. But what was also part of it was that he had braved the immense secularist pressure against this person after the Godhra riots. And so he had been cleared by the courts a number of times, yet the secularists had been saying, keep on saying, even today, that he was guilty, that he held back his police force from stopping the rioting and blah, blah. Now, he had stood firm. He had not given in. He had won all his court cases, and so therefore he was the Hindu Hridaya Samrat. Local sources tell me that after that, however, he didn't do anything pro-Hindu in Gujarat. That I can't very well judge. It's possible. But anyway, you see, those details are just small fry compared to his image of Hindu Hridaya Samrat. And that image he brought to the elections in 2014. That's also, first of all, why he won the candidacy. Because BJP really wanted to push Rajnath Singh. Rajnath Singh himself understood that, in terms of catching votes, he was no match at all for Modi. And so the Hindus, who are how shall I say that here in Silicon Valley, who are a lazy bunch and who never show up on election day, then you see they came out to vote for Modi. So essentially, the talk about Modi winning because of development is rank nonsense. You see, he won because of his Hindu image. And with his policies, I'm afraid he has badly dented that image. Like 2 days ago, I was at some Hindu day, World Hindu Day or something in New Jersey, taking turns with a Kashmiri Pandit, Sushil Pandit. And so he gave a testimony from Jammu, really moving testimony about everything that the BJP could have done and failed to do. How, on the contrary, you see, they made it far worse. Like they said to these Rohingya refugees, among them to upset the communal balance in such a communally sensitive area. How they did everything, bent over backwards to appease the terrorists, the separatists. And then he related how Amit Shah had visited the BJP workers in Jammu. And everybody there said, you see, we can't face the public anymore. How can we ask anyone to vote for BJP after the BJP has done all this? And cynically, Amit Shah answered, and where will you go? What other party is ever going to take up the Hindu cause? So you see, the only alternative left is to set up a new party. But that is a very big job. He has been tried a few elections ago in Haryana. There was some local Hindu-minded party that was not of the RSS, but they didn't go far. And I've never heard of anything of it since. So that's a very big job. And therefore, you see, I'm very sorry for now not taking things in logical order, but I'll answer straight away. What is the alternative? Well, you see, I don't have the final answer. You have to start thinking about this. But so, as an opener, I would say you could have a a movement that works inside the party as well as outside of it, that can also negotiate with Congress to put forward its demands. Maybe Congress will come around. They may be cynical and only think of votes. Doesn't matter. Use that mechanism to make them accept your demands. So that's what you do outside the party. But inside the party, you form a tendency. This is something that exists in many democracies. Two examples I always give. In Britain, you have the militant tendency within the Labour Party, the Trotskyite hard left tendency that has made the Labour Party into a channel for its demands in some occasions. Similarly, in America, within the Republican Party, you have the Tea Party that goes in a conservative direction. So both of these tendencies inside the party have certain successes to their credit. So that is something that is a realistic option that could be done overnight. And now you see with modern technology, you can immediately reach everyone. So that is a very realistic option. Now, how far it can go, I don't know yet, but it's something to try. It's certainly better than not to do anything. However, you see, I don't think that you should go to the vote booth with the idea of punishing the BJP and voting nota, none of the above. Not that they don't deserve a punishment. They need a good spanking. But nevertheless, I don't think election day is the occasion. Because then you have to face the question that every BJP militant will ask you, what is the alternative? You see, if you bring in Congress, you see, Congress is not what it used to be. In the 80s, Congress was in favor of the Ayodhya temple before the BJP snatched the issue from them. And you see, they were still largely a party of Brahmins and of Dalits, and they are neither anymore. They lost the Dalits to the Bahujan Samaj Party. They lost the Brahmins mainly to the BJP. But in those days, they still cared about the Hindu electorate, and they wanted to throw them some crumbs on occasion. And you saw something of that when Rahul Gandhi and Shashi Tharoor declared that they were Hindus, that they were Yagyoparit wearing Brahmin and so on. That's part of that tendency to also serve the Hindus apart from and next to the minorities. But I think mainly now it has evolved into really becoming a pro-minority party. But anyway, you see, there somebody closer to ground realities can say more. So
I had a question.
No, let me finish this first. At the moment, you really don't have any alternatives to the BJP. And in that sense, well, you don't have any alternatives to the BJP in the sense that on occasion, you still may expect some pro-Hindu developments from the BJP side. And what convinced me of that quite spectacularly was the accession to power of Yogi Adityanath. I mean, I think this, when I first saw him, I thought, wow, this is great. First of all, he's a real yogi. Simply, you watch the way he sits, you immediately know this is a real yogi. And the way he looks and smiles and so on, it just fits the picture of a real yogi. I've been told, I don't know, that he never sits face to face with women, which is what quite a few monks do, like the Swaminarayan monks, and which is perhaps, you know, it may be a bit sexist, I don't know what they say, but it is a very acceptable alternative, I would say, to having priests in sexual scandals. That is the usual alternative. Anyway, so, you know, let's not go into that, but you see, he's a committed monk. He has a good track record. as a parliamentarian, as the leader of his Akhara. He's not of BJP provenance. His own guru was from the Hindu Mahasabha, the last parliamentarian of the Hindu Mahasabha. And so he has his own background, which is not an RSS background. Maybe that's why I like him. But at any rate, you see, he convinced me right away. Wow, this is what UP needs. Then the first thing he did was very sensible. It was about vernacular education. He made sure that English was made second language in Hindi schools from, I don't know, second form or so, from early on. Calculated so that by the time they leave school, the Hindi medium kids know English, which is the normal situation in Germany, in Japan, everywhere. They learn English, but as a second language. They don't neglect their own mother tongue for that. So I thought this was a very good thing. Of course, some Hindi wallahs were fulminating, oh, another sellout. No, on the contrary. You see, seemingly it's a little concession to English, but in fact it saves vernacular education. So you see this, I like what he did. So I would say, well, you know, if Congress had been in power, you would not have had him as chief minister. So that is a little redeeming argument in favor of still voting BJP. Nevertheless, I think there really is a problem. And so and here you see, as a foreigner, I am at a loss. I just don't understand the mentality that has led the BJP to all this. That has led Amit Shah, for example, to be so cynical and harsh against the Hindus of China. There is something there that just escapes me.
But what is the problem with the BJP or is it with the Hindus? I'm just taking a contrasting example, right? In the US, when the conservatives, launched the PAC to capture power, they had very clear set of demands what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
None of them admirable, but then they had a set of demands they wanted to extract out of any president, be it George Bush, be it the previous presidents or Obama or anyone, and they got it. Maybe they asked for 20, they got 12. Okay? But I don't think our Hindus really had any clear set of expectations and demands. They articulate and get back, and it's not those who vote get the rewards, and it's those who are vociferous get the rewards, right? And the Hindus are not.
Yeah. So my question is precisely the same, that I can understand why Modi or Shah will not act in repealing RT or 93rd Amendment and all that. But when you look at the think tanks which are associated with the right wing, Vivekanand Foundation, Ram Madhavan India Foundation, they run this big ideas festival where people talk about becoming a Vishwa Guru when we can't run our own primary school properly. So it appears there is that entire layer is missing, which can articulate some clear demands, analyze a law and so on. And we see that the current government is passing new schemes like Padho Pardesh, minority only scheme to study in USA, I mean for Indian students. And there is Hunar Haat and minority only institutions and so on. And it appears there is no layer that can actually criticize that even internally.
Yes, it is perhaps insufficiently realized that the Modi government has not only done nothing pro-Hindu, it has actually continued a number of policies that are seriously anti-Hindu and extended those policies, even where they didn't exist before. Like the educational schemes you mentioned, reservations for minorities, that means reservations against Hindus. You see, first of all, the whole principle of reservations, of course, I don't like. I mean, here in America, perhaps they will say, oh, affirmative action and so on. Okay, I will not comment on the American situation. In India, I am 100% against this principle of reservations. Caste reservations, I understand where it comes from. I think, nevertheless, that it has lasted a bit too long. But there, again, I won't comment. Maybe you see, if Hindus themselves decide that they want to have scheduled caste, scheduled tribe reservations, all right. But what is totally unacceptable is reservations for minorities, sectarian reservations. Totally unacceptable. You see, and there is no way that Modi or the Modi Bhakts can anyhow justify this. Totally unacceptable. When I say the BJP needs to be punished, well, you see that certainly.
I don't know where you are coming from this.
No minority reservation will never happen.
Well, you people should fight it out then. But you see, I have other sources that do explain the fact of BJP minority appeasement in many instances, and there is no counter instance, none.
The BJP government has announced 3 lakh rupees for every marriage where a lower caste man marries upper caste girl. Do you know that?
Well, you see, again, these caste politics goodies are a different issue. You see, whether there should be caste reservations and so on, that is another issue that I will not go into. We're talking about minority issues, sectarian privileges.
No. How does one justify Padho Pardes?
No, even that.
How does one justify Padho Pardes? I mean, are you saying the scheme doesn't exist?
No, even that scheme which you just spoke about.
Exhibition which was only exclusively limited to Muslim artisans and minority artisans who were organized by the Ministry of Defense.
So,
Why do you have only for minorities?
correct. And also BJP excluded all the Christian institutions from RP.
All minority institution thing is that's how this was earlier chief minister of Andhra. He Christian control those organizations.
Yes, exactly. So there is again a great attraction of the exit. Everybody wants to leave Hinduism because being a non-Hindu is so advantageous. That situation is not being stopped, is not being addressed at all. Why do you vote the BJP in power if nothing is done about that?
We were all BJP supporters, but now there is so much awareness in us. I was talking to her. Article 370 is on civil code Ram Janmabhoomi. Forget about that. Forget. No. What has to happen? Forget about that. But what about rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits? What about making provisions to constitution so that groups like Limbayats do not ask to be separated from Hinduism? What about
Can I just interject?
Okay, let's take these questions in turn. Let's answer them all. Let's first take his question about the think tanks. You see, what are the think tanks doing? Are they not advising the government to take up these issues? First of all, of course, sometimes there is someone who advises the government from a position of power to take up these issues, though it is not for. At the time of the Vajpayee government, we still had the politician who by now died, Pramod Mahajan, and he told the Vajpayee government, you see, you've done nothing pro-Hindu, all right, but you see the elections are looming, and now you should revive your pro-Hindu faith. What you should do is take up some Hindu issue. There's always, at that time, there was the excuse that our coalition partners won't go as far as doing anything pro-Hindu, so our hands are tied, we can't do anything. Well, now that the government is almost over, you can nevertheless do something that they don't like. You bring up some pro-Hindu issue. If they'll go with you, then you have a majority, you achieve it, and you go with that to the electorate. With that, you say, oh, we are a pro-Hindu party. We can really do something for you. Vote for us. Or alternatively, your coalition partners block your move, and then you can make that the stake of the election. You can say, well, if you want this, give us a majority. Vote for us. Okay? So maybe he only said it out of electoral calculations. But nevertheless, once in a while, this can happen. Nevertheless, it is not the think tanks who will do it. Like, you mentioned Vivekananda Foundation and so on. Well, I know these think tanks enough to know that they are only allowed to think insofar as the conclusion that they come up with is the prescribed answer. You see, first the RSS tells you, we want to say, we need more national unity or some other platitude. And then they start thinking hard and writing, and then they come up with, after convoluted reasonings they come up with, the RSS answer. Hey, you know, you say about the India Ideas Conclave.
Yes.
Well, I can tell you about the India Ideas Conclave. You see, no. In fact, it's a story worth telling. And it is all about this government. This was in December 2014. You see, when the Modi government had recently come to power. In fact, I had already written a little book about whatever they had done that first half year. Because I already noticed the trend that by now is complete. But anyway, they wanted me to talk about Islam. There was some panel discussion with some so-called moderate Muslim who's extremely pro, makes Islam, whitewashing Islam, propaganda whitewashing Islam. That's what he does. Sultan Shaheen. And then some Norwegian bishop who's into religious dialogue, blah, blah. And the main theme at that time, you see, there was ISIS going strong. So they wanted to know if what ISIS is doing, is that real Islam? Now, the answer that they wanted to get was, no, this is not real Islam. I mean, they didn't say that, but I know that is the answer they wanted to have, which what follows will show. Before the thing started, I said to the moderator, well, are you really sure you want this debate? Because I had noticed some Muslims among the audience. I thought that this was going to be a Hindu think fest where finally we could really, go to the heart of the matter. No, you see, this was some diplomatic exercise to please everyone. Lots of money had been thrown to it. So I thought, you see, well, being a guest here, I don't want to spoil the fun. If you want me to speak about Islam, I'm not going to tell lies. See, I'm going to say what I think. So either you want me to say that, or I can talk about something else, like, for instance, about the record of the Modi government, what we're talking about today, which at that time already was worth talking about, which I think Hindu Ideas Conclave should have taken up par excellence. But you see, I was the only one with that idea. No, they insisted that, this was about it. Well, okay, I gave my mind about ISIS and whether what they did was Islamic. And I gave a number of examples of everything they did and that made the newspapers as atrocity was exactly after the precedent created by Muhammad himself. You see, like all these Yazidi women being taken as slaves. Well, that's what Muhammad did with the Jewish women. One of them, you see, who had just hours before lost her husband, her father, her brothers. He took in his harem personally, and all the others were sold on the slave market.
And she was also ransomed for 400 dirhams.
Right. Or, for instance, Muhammad gave his men, when they captured caravans of the Meccans who were still pagan, they took hostage all the passengers. And so the men said, you see, you don't want us to have these women among us just watching them. We want to rape them. And then Muhammad said, well, yes, but, even a robber chieftain has a certain honor code. So Muhammad made it a point to return the stolen goods unharmed. So the women not pregnant. So he said to his men, well, yeah, you go ahead and rape them, but you should practice coitus interruptus. They didn't have the pill in those days and so on. And in fact, I know this for very sure. Even if I had never read Islamic scripture, I would have known it because it is brought up many times by Muslims themselves in defense of Islam. You see, when you say the Pope this and that, then they say, yeah, but Christianity is reactionary. Like, for example, they are against birth control. Whereas Muhammad, you see, he was for coitus interruptus. Yeah. Well, yes, he was. Later, of course, he changed his mind about this. On the next occasion, when his men had raided this, took women hostage, then he said, well, everything is decided by God. So if God doesn't want her to get pregnant, she won't. So go ahead. But so you see, that's what Muhammad did. So ISIS did nothing abnormal. You see, of course, the use of modern explosives that hadn't been tried by Muhammad. That's but the fact of killing and all that was already there. And moreover, this is not some historical detail. It's very explicit in Muslim law that a president of Muhammad has force of law. So that's what I said. And nobody was capable of countering it. Not my fellow panelists, nor anyone from the audience. And so then it was over. I got the most rousing applause I've ever had in my life. With, you see, Hindu women in the audience coming to hug me and so on. I never, in America, this might happen. In India, I had not expected it at all. But then one of the organizers, Swapan Das Gupta, came on stage and he apologized. He apologized for what I had said. He apologized for troubling the poor, hapless audience with the terrible things they had. And you see, then, okay, the thing went on.
He should be the PR person for the Catholic Church next. He should be the PR man for the Catholic Church.
Okay.
Was he asked to apologize? Was he asked by...
Well, yeah, clearly that was a move by the organizers. Later that evening, they sent some boy to my room. They did not come themselves, though the occasion was important enough, telling me to leave the premises. And you see, the argument they used was this. The Muslims here in the audience, they may go to the police and file a complaint against you on the basis of the law against, spreading hatred against other religions or so. And they said, this is a non-bailable law. Even Chief Minister Parikar, who was in fact, I know now, behind all this, even he cannot prevent you from having to go to jail for a few years because it's a non-bailable offense. Even if later on you get released and you win the court case and so on, nevertheless, they will have to arrest you. And my first reaction was, hey, this is great. Let's create a really good riot. But then I thought of the words of Sitaram Goel, who had warned me 20 years earlier. He said, in India, you should make sure never to have to go to jail. Because you don't know who they have been bribed by, nor for what. Moreover, I happen to be a heart transplant veteran. So there are certain medicines I have to take every day. And if I don't take them for some time, I die. So it's literally a life and death medicine. Now, I do know that if you go to jail, usually they take all your medicine-like stuff from you because they don't want you to commit suicide. And so they might do that, So I thought, well, this is, okay, I'll take their airplane ticket and leave because they had already rebooked everything and so on. What played in their mind was they feared that the next day the press that had been massively invited would come and interview me, and that I then would say things that the BJP doesn't like. And because, of course, the press is very eager to depict the BJP as a fanatically anti-Muslim and so on, which I know from experience they are absolutely not. But you see, they would like to use me to project that image about them. So you see, that's what I did. So again, you see that thought form, the India Ideas Conclave, has to put up a show of intellectual performance, which only is meant to come to conclusions that have been set beforehand. So I don't think there's any thinking going on there. None of those platforms is going to change the BJP's policy.
This quantity festival, there are lots of political topics, pro-Hindu topics that were discussed last month.
I don't know. You just heard, for example, the gentleman raising the topic of the Kashmiri Pandits. Now, I don't know if those festivals you talk of, anyone brings up that issue. It has been brought up here. And I notice here it has not been answered. You see, you have not been able to say, but the BJP has done something for Kashmiri Pandits. No, I know they have not. So
They settled the Rohingya Muslims, but not the Pakistani Hindu refugees.
exactly. For example, the Pakistani Hindu refugees. I mean, this is like the first thing you can do. You give them citizenship. No, you see, you give citizenship to millions of Bangladeshi infiltrators, but you withhold citizenship from genuine Hindu refugees. What is this?
So I have one question over here. Do you think the real issue or the real monster isn't the freedom of press? Because no matter the BJP or the present government, even if they have their own policies, they are not able to implement it or even touch it, or damn scared of it because the press next day might make a big issue out of it. And
But the problem is
entire
not
time-
the press at all. We know the press. We know there's a hostile press, and in most countries, the press is hostile against the government. And that's one of its functions, you see, to criticize. And it's normal in a democracy. You see, we in the West don't understand anything passionately in favor of the government. Like, for instance, I remember students were staging a demonstration in favor of the government against the United States. You see, what we should say is, but then what is this demonstration necessary for? If they are only supporting policies that the government is already implementing. You see, if you come out to speak your mind, it's obviously against what is at the moment prevailing. And so, you see, that principle applied to India means that most democratically minded people are tolerant towards even a biased anti-government stance by the media. At any rate, I do know that the media is biased, that they could be a lot better and a lot fairer. Nevertheless, at any rate, that is not a problem. So in this case, the issue that we are talking about here, the status of the press is not a problem. Anyway, you see, even if it were the problem, you are not going to hear me say that the solution is to stop the freedom of the press. You see, I think the freedom of the press is a very good thing. And even if there are negative side effects, well, then we'll have to address those negative side effects. But of course, there should be freedom of the press.
So, point out one thought, just to add to that, just one thought. In India, much of the media makes laws, okay? Except those who just dish out entertainment, right? Like songs and that kind of thing. All the others make laws, right? And their reach on influencing people is quite minimal. So even if the government completely ignored the media and then went about enforcing its policies, it won't lose anything. Okay, and I think the problem is, I think, more with the BJP and the RSS, because they want to bend over backward to appease the left-leaning West-controlled media. Like, one good example is how the RSS invaded Pranab Mukherjee plenary session, where he could give them more than with anybody else. Like,
yes, the problem is with Hindu thinking. You see, as I said, you see their organizational strength. Okay, that I admit completely. But they are completely incompetent intellectually. They have no good analysis of the different forces in the field. They don't understand what is the Christian Missionary Project. They don't understand Maoism and the Naxal. You know, and like your think tanks, you see Rakesh Sinha, one of your think tanks, is a big supporter, big propagator of the idea that every Indian is a Hindu, you see, of muddle think. Okay, so that's what you get there, muddle think, and that results in silly policies. And you can redress that if you replace muddle think with serious think. But I don't know how to do it. You see, I mean, I notice that anything that is being said, even by insiders, falls on deaf ears. Like you have this private bill by Satyapal Singh, who even made it to some kind of minister post, where he does address the anti-Hindu discriminations in the law. And you see, that private bill that was entered without support of the party, but in his personal capacity, he he launched his private bill that has gone nowhere. But the text of the private bill is impeccable, even though on other occasions Satya Pal Singh has said a few funny things about evolution theory and so on. But the text of that bill is perfect. You see where he argues at length first why it is absurd to have these anti-secular discriminations in the Constitution, and then proposes exactly what legal articles should be accepted as amendments to these articles of the Constitution. So that merits full support, which I notice the BJP is not willing to give. Though, between brackets, I still consider it possible that, not for Hindu reasons, but purely for electoral reasons, they may reconsider that position before the elections. Maybe, I hope so, I pray so, but I really don't know, and I'm afraid, don't expect that they will still come around and support those amendments. So you see there, that is when they have a minister's council, this man is there, and yet Modi is totally insensitive to it. So you see, I mean, as a little pen pusher on the sides, I feel totally incapable of doing anything except convincing people around me, but they too are not in a position to make the BJP come alive and address these issues. Yes.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, whereas everybody wants to know doing things in their own way, trying to push this agenda. This is like, if not now, then when? What is stopping you from at least showing your intent, if not actions? At least show me that you're going to do it in the next term.
Yes.
I'm fine if you don't do it before 2019, but at least show me that you're going to do something about RT in the next term. Show me that you're going to do something about it in the next term. And I don't get those things.
Right.
I don't want to do about it.
They're worried
Thanks
about
for the feedback.
being in power.
Excuse me, can you say loud?
They're worried about being in the power for next term.
They're worried about re-election.
Re-election.
Well, if they want to get re-elected, they should quickly come out and do something pro-Hindu to mobilize the Hindu electorate. Here I'll say something in favor of the RSS and of the ordinary BJP workers. You see, why have many of them joined them? Why in Kerala are they risking their lives by joining the RSS, where many RSS men get killed by the communists? Why? Well, not because they're committed to the RSS, but because they are committed to Hinduism. You see, and there you have thousands of cases similar to the one of Yogi Adityanath. You see, by some quirk of fate, he came in the BJP camp and he made it the chief minister. And so similarly, very many people want to do something for Hinduism and think that the way to do it is through the RSS. Why? Because the whole anti-RSS media say so. You see, and all the Western India watchers say that, oh, the RSS is a fanatically pro-Hindu organization, blah, blah, blah. So I know that this is not true at all, but very many common Hindus think so. And so you do have very good, very committed pro-Hindu people right now working for the RSS or BJP. What is happening in those circles, I don't have my finger on the pulse very much, but what I hear is that there is a great reluctance to work for the BJP. Maybe they will, but not as enthusiastically as all out as in 2014. That in turn may have the effect on cynical electoral calculators like Amit Shah, that perhaps, you see, we should throw them some crumbs. In fact, in the beginning of the Modi government, someone who was then a confidence man of Modi, now he fell out, told me that, you see, what was said there was that we should keep the pot boiling. You see, that's more or less what Pramod Mahajan had told Vajpayee. You should make the Hindus feel good, give them the impression that something pro-Hindu is being done. You don't really have to do anything, but create that impression. Well, and so you see, many of the ordinary workers have been bought off to some extent. But you see, by now, you see, after saying for 4 years, yeah, but first they need time. You see, first they need to learn and to adapt, blah, 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 as if they hadn't had time enough before that. And in their case, as if they didn't already have government experience from last time around. So you see, the simple reluctance of those common people to really give their best, that perhaps may convince the BJP leadership to finally really do something for them. So I would not yet entirely give up on them. Yes.
Because since BJP seems to rely so much on the IT outreach and
Yeah.
and all that, how vulnerable are they to all the social media influencers, putting their plans? They take it seriously.
No, they don't take it seriously.
They don't.
Last week, we had a meeting with India's Law Minister, Koenraad Elst. I was talking about the serious situation, that a Kashmir-like situation could grow up in Tamil Nadu state. He didn't even bother about that. He simply ignored arrogantly that, no, India is a mighty state. They are dead gaming. What they can do? Sir, I have some evidences. No, nothing to do with that. They can't do anything with India. So that is their attitude. So whatever we tell in social media, so
Yes.
just ignore it. They are in a different plane, in a bubble. Yeah.
Well, that brings us back to the intellectual culture behind the RSS. I once talked with their MP at that time, Dinanath Mishra, who died in the meantime. And so I gave him my idea. See, the RSS is effectively a dinosaur with a small brain. To which he proposed, well, in that case, we should infuse some more brain into the dinosaur. Well, yeah, that's a good idea, but so far it hasn't worked. At any rate, what it reminds me of, and this is not my invention, this was told by Sitaram Goel, is an occasion in 1782 when the Peshwa Mahaji Sindhya contracted some pact with the Mughal Empire, which he controlled completely militarily. He could have folded the Mughal Empire right there. Nevertheless, he prostrated. Now, that's the BJP for you today. You see, they are entirely going by the secularist framework. Like, for instance, there was a controversy in the beginning about Gharwapasi. Some Hindus, like the Swami who organized this big conference in Chicago, Swami Vidyananda, they are working on reconversion of Muslims. Now, you see, all the time Hindus are being converted to Christianity, but as soon as Hindus convert a few people, then it's a big scandal. Now, you see, in that scandal, the BJP government immediately sided with the secularists against their own people. And immediately said, no, we have nothing to do with this. Well, you see, they, in their position, could right now fold secularism as a paradigm by which India functions. And instead, they are totally subservient to it. Totally, not only in their policies where you could find excuses of political expediency and so on. No, you see, it's in their minds. They really believe it. They have really interiorized it. Read, for example, this is a bit earlier, but it strongly indicates the trend, the autobiography by L.K. Advani. You see, where he says that, he doesn't want to just serve the majority, meaning the Hindus. He doesn't want India only to be a country of the majority. But where is that option? You see, who is going around with that? Maybe Golwalkar 70 years ago, maybe. But right now, that is just not an issue. What's he talking about? The secularists, they are talking in those terms. That is entirely a secularist story that he has absorbed 100%. Hook, line, and sinker. So that is the BJP mindset. They have no analysis of their own.
I totally agree with that. I remember, around 10, 15 years back, I was in Goa, and BJP won that election, but LK Advani and Pramod Mahajan and everybody had come to Goa, and we had all gone for the meet. And I think 98% or even 100% of the people who were there were Hindus. The Catholics of Goa would not vote for BJP or the center. But Advani came there, and out of his 30 minutes of speech, he took 20 minutes to describe how today was the Easter day and how BJP was formed on the Easter day, and Easter day, and Easter day, and Easter day. And people there did not understand it at all. But they were just polite, they were just sitting there, and they were like, But 20 minutes out of his 30 minutes on Easter day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you see, what you need is a vanguard party. Chairman Mao Zedong, whose followers are still very active in Chhattisgarh and Telangana and so on, and whose urban followers are still very active in the media, the so-called urban Naxals. Well, this same Chairman Mao, he's one of my great heroes. Already was when I was a teenager. When I bought the Little Red Book at lower price. Well, anyway, at 14. Now, the first page of the Little Red Book, I didn't get much further. But you see, the first page of the Little Red Book says something to really keep in mind. There is no revolution without a vanguard party. You see, the alternative is what you saw in the so-called Arab Spring. There was a good feeling and so on, and they gave a few photo opportunities to Western journalists, how it was all hunky-dory. And then you see some fighting in the streets and so on. And in Egypt on the Tahrir Square, which means the Liberation Square, some rapes also. But anyway, after the fun was over, nothing happened. Except in Egypt, where there was an important